Our next speaker will be Maggie McDonough. She will... Do you need help with the presentation?
I don't know, we'll see.
Let me, in the meantime, introduce her. She currently serves as the Managing Director of Souktel Advisory Services Group, leading the development and execution of the company's digital design, program delivery, and new business strategies for the aid and development sector. Prior to joining Souktel, Ms. McDonough spent over 10 years at the international nonprofit IREX, where she managed media development programming and global new business development. Maggie also serves as a program implementation specialist at IFES and at USAID's Europe and Eurasia Bureau. Maggie brings extensive experience in digital strategy design and information and communication technologies for development in the Middle East and North Africa region and globally. Maggie holds a BA in history from the University of Michigan and an MA in International Affairs from the George Washington University. Please.
Thank you, Sandra, for the introduction, and thank you also to the World Bank for the invitation to participate in this event. This idea of driving innovation in different types of sectors is something that we hold very near and dear to our heart. Let's see if I can get this working. I should say we're a software company, not a hardware company, so occasionally I'm challenged in working with things like this. Okay. Yeah, that's what I was doing. I don't think, yeah, there we go. All right. So I just wanted to start off for about 30 seconds or so telling you a little bit about Souktel and who we are and why I'm here talking to you today. So we are a Palestinian-American company. We're headquartered primarily in Ramallah. Also have presence in Amman, Berlin, and Washington, D.C., which is where I am based. And we're a little bit different from some of the other technology companies that are here today in that I'm not coming to present a core product line to you. That isn't how we work. We are much more focused on the custom design and development of different types of software products that serve exclusively the aid and development sector globally. Our approach has been driven by 10 or 11 years of experience working in the sector, where we spent the first couple of years starting out with a core product line and then quickly finding that it didn't address a lot of the challenges that our partners and implementers were having on the ground. So we've changed our approach a little bit. So instead of saying, here's our core product line, how could we fit this into an agriculture program? We instead started looking at what the development challenges were that our partners and stakeholders were really having and say, here's the problem, how can we bring technology to bear to solve some of these challenges that we're seeing at the field level? So as a result of that, we have our team, both in Ramallah and in DC, are comprised both of international development practitioners, sectoral specialists, and software designers and developers. So given our approach, there are a couple of key areas which are outlined on this slide, which I won't read to you, but a couple of different areas where we have done a lot of sort of repeat work in the agriculture sector. We've done a lot of work around data-driven agriculture, so in terms of collecting and analyzing big data so that our partners know what's working and what isn't. Looking at different ways to improve access to information, and also supporting digital financial services, which I'm not going to go into very much as part of this presentation, but I'm happy to discuss afterwards if anybody is interested. So what I thought I would do is select a couple of different use cases. I want to do this in a very problem-oriented way, since that's the way we work, and select 3 or 4 different problems that we've been presented with during our time as a company, and talk you through a little bit about the different technology solutions that we've developed to address some of those challenges. And this first case, I'm probably going to spend the least amount of time on, since it focuses largely on digital extension services. I mean, we've just heard an excellent presentation from our colleague at Asuku, who in the development community are truly some of the pioneers in terms, are viewed as pioneers in terms of introducing things like two-way information exchanges and multi-channel approaches to digital extension. So I'll let that presentation stand on its own. But I do want to mention it since it is current work that we are doing here in country. And in this case, a lot of the problem that we saw was accessing communities that have a pretty disparate needs in terms of technology. There were really varying levels of device access, varying levels of digital literacy, different ways that our user groups interacted with technology, different types of connectivity access, et cetera. And so in terms of what we developed here, it was really focusing on different types of multi-channel solutions. So in other words, being able to develop a suite of services that were able to reach our user groups either by SMS, by IVR or audio, by smartphone applications, by messenger-based applications, so that nobody was sort of excluded from the services that we were offering in a digital way. So this I'm going to just sort of cut short, although I'm happy to talk about it more afterwards. I want to move on to, for us, what was a very interesting use case that we are just wrapping up in Zimbabwe under the auspices of DFID funding. And in this case, our client came to us with a very specific problem, which was empowering smallholder farmers to reach aggregator markets. Now, I realize that the question of aggregator markets can be a fairly controversial one. So for this, we'll just take it as a given that this is what our client wanted in this case, which was to let the smallholder farmers that we were working with better sell their wares at that level, at this third-party aggregator level. So in this case, the problem was very specific, which was that third-party aggregators couldn't easily source produce from smallholder farmers, and smallholder farmers were basically invisible to the aggregators. We also were stuck with the challenge of having rural-based smallholder farmers in Zimbabwe thriving primarily in very low bandwidth environments. So where data connectivity was not regular, in some cases it was non-existent. So really looking for a solution that worked in that case. So what our team did was develop a mobile bids and offer system that allowed smallholder farmers to list the commodities that they had to sell, and for aggregators to be able to find, review, and transact business around the purchase of those commodities. Now, the two interesting things in the case of Zimbabwe, one is that it was built on a USSD channel, which is, I don't want to sort of bore you with the technical details of that, but it's a way where you can conduct real-time transactions in very low bandwidth environments. And so this was, in the context of Zimbabwe, a fairly innovative application in allowing smallholder farmers to conduct transactions in real time, even from a basic flip phone. The second interesting thing about this was the mobile network partnership that evolved around it. In all cases with USSD, it requires consent of a mobile network. But in this case, we worked with Ecotel, which was the mobile network operator in Zimbabwe that held about 85% of the market share. And we were able to work with them not only to co-develop the bids and offers system, but to, over time, roll this into their offerings of value-added services that were then available to their own subscribers. And so in that way, we were able to bring the marketing power and the tech support to the application over the long term. A third use case that I wanted to talk about was in Morocco. This was a program that we recently concluded in the past year or so. And we were brought in this case, the ministry, we worked closely with the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Water and Environment in Morocco, they had sort of long prioritized better use of water resources in farming communities. They'd invested heavily in the development of regionally based weather stations to better gather the data on weather. And then they also had invested heavily in different types of drip irrigation systems. So when we started working with the ministry, the issue was this. They had this big pool of data that was created by the weather stations, but they didn't really know what to do with it. What they had been doing is sending out alerts to farmers saying, for example, you have to, for tomato farmers in Essaouira, you have to water for 2 cubic meters of water per hectare on a given day. But the problem is that all the calculations had to be done manually. That was the first problem. And then the second problem is that farmers didn't have any type of way to measure the water. They didn't have any metering units available. So it made the information fairly useless to the farmers who most needed it. So what we did is work with the ministry to develop a system both to automate that process, but then also to make it much more actionable information for the farmers. So basically, we built an algorithmic platform that would triangulate the weather data, crop data, and then data that was input by the farmers when they registered for the service, where they entered the type of irrigation equipment they had. So instead of getting, information like, 2 cubic meters per hectare today, they would just get an SMS message every day saying, turn on your water pump for 2 hours. And simplifying the information, automating it, and making it more actionable. And then the final use case that I'd like to share, something that we did in Rwanda. It's probably one of the least interesting to talk about, but one of the most vital when it comes to different types of agriculture programming, and that is being able to collect and analyze data so that you know what's working and what isn't. So in Rwanda, we were presented with a challenge of collecting information around over 40,000 beneficiaries that were spread across 19 districts in Rwanda. And sort of how to know what they were doing and how to know what was working and to be able to spot some of the trends by region, by gender, by age group, et cetera. So that was the first problem. And then the second problem was how to help youth find jobs in the agriculture sector, which in Rwanda, as in the case of many places, can be a largely informal marketplace. So how do you find entry-level jobs for people that want to go into the sector? So what we did in this case is built out a multi-channel data collection and analysis system that was where our implementers, the ministry, private sector partners, anybody who was interested was able to access data, not just on the number of people trained, but where real gains were being made in development terms. And then the second thing we did is built out a job matching system, which was, again, something done completely by mobile phone. People could access it using any simple flip phone. Both employers and job seekers could register with the service. There was an algorithmic process that happened that would match people up. And in this way, we ended up placing over 10,000 youth in agriculture sector jobs. So to wrap up, I just wanted to share some of the lessons that we've sort of learned over the years in terms of creating digital solutions for the agriculture sector. One, and I can't emphasize this enough, but to really look at the human-centered design methodologies when you're thinking about what to do. So for anybody who is considering entering this challenge, this innovation challenge that's been announced today, the words of advice that I would give is find out as much as you can about the user groups that are going to be that you anticipate using your technology. They will always interact with it in a way other than what you expect. So find out as much as you can about that. And then the other of these points that I would emphasize is the fact that digital interventions are a tool, they aren't a goal. And I think sometimes as development practitioners, we can lose sight of that. It's not the silver bullet. It doesn't work in every case, and I don't want to undermine the message of the event here today, but it's worth it to take a look of whether, whether digital solutions are actually the answer, or whether, whether the solution that you're imagining is over-engineered. The most important thing is to meet people where they are in tech terms. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions after the panel's over or to talk more about any of these examples during our break. Thank you.